Again, welcome to all of you for coming to our first presentation of the Kent Miller Quinton Reeves lecture series. My name is Dr. Scott Tarrant. I'm the chair of the Social Sciences Department. It's the Social Sciences Department that sponsors this monthly presentations. Just so you know, if you're wondering who was Kent Miller and Quinton Reeves, well, these are retired faculty members. They both were hired in the early 1970s. I'm not exactly sure what year, roughly the year I was born. But they started teaching here at Weatherford College and taught for roughly 40 years in history, political science, and whatever else was asked of them. And they were both retired. So we thought it would be fitting to name this lecture series after them in their honor. Today's presentation is titled Newberry Cabin, a project between Weatherford College, Doss Heritage and Cultural Center, and the Tarrant County Archeological Society. And there are going to actually be three presentations in one. And our presenters today are Amanda Edwards, who is the curator of the Doss Heritage and Cultural Center, Katrina Nuncio, who is an instructor of archaeology here for Weatherford College, and Professor Lori Gouge, who is not only a geology instructor for us, but also the chair of the social sciences, not the social sciences, the physical sciences department. But if you want my job, all right. Now, we're going to do the presentation. Afterwards, if you have any questions, and I encourage you to ask questions, feel free to ask them at that time. And afterwards, you are all in luck if you choose to stick around. I would strongly encourage you to do so. Ms. Edwards is going to be giving us a tour of the museum, which is a pretty big deal. So there we are. And so, who's up first? All right. Who's up first? Who's up first?
Technology.
Oh, it's right. Hello, thank you for being here today. I'm very proud and privileged to be a part of this project, and my part of the presentation is going to be as to how I came across this project, the things that I had to do to make it come to fruition, and then I'll lead right into Katrina's part. About fall, I'm going to hold this. Fall of 2015, our then President, Dr. Eaton, brought the director of the Doss, Mr. Dean Hungate, into my office and said, I think she can help you. And I said, have a seat. And he started to tell me about a project that the Doss was starting where they were going to have a pioneer park, and they were going to move historic cabins from various areas in Parker County to an area behind the Doss Center. It's not open yet, but it will be soon. Their goal was to, back up. The Newberry cabin was special because it had been never moved before. It was on its original deed from 1870s. And so he was wanting to know if we would have students available to excavate. And I said, sure. And I said, let me see what I can do to find some people to help you with this. He proposed a partnership between Weatherford College and the Doss in that it would become a learning center, and the field would be a school, a classroom for these students to learn about archaeology and the history of Parker County. So really the first thing I said was, yeah, I'm thrilled, let's do this. But the second thing I said was, I'm not an archaeologist, and I have no way to give any kind of respectful study to this particular project, and I need to find some people. So before I go into that part, this is a little tour of the cabin. So just give me a minute here. Thank you. So I was invited to come out to the cabin. Actually, this was taken this year, so you can see that the porch is gone. And the building next door has nothing to do with this cabin. It was an add-on later for hunting. But this is my impression of the cabin as I walked in, and I wanted to share my impression with you. So you're getting to see the cabin just like I saw it, so that you can see the walls are wood with chinking, And so I'm panning around and I'm looking at the original floor, and there's the original fireplace with mantle, and the chimney is still intact outside. And I said, can I be on this project? And they said, yeah, you can be on this project. And one of my favorite things to do was to look out the window or stand on the porch and envision what the pioneers were looking at when they lived here, and they actually lived here. There we go. So that's what the cabin is, what it looks like. So some still shots show the original timbers that have been hand hewn, and there are some outer structures, such as a cistern. The windmill provided water for the cattle to drink from, and there was a barn, but it had already been disarticulated. And I wanted to include the cistern because, as we found out later, Miss Pat Newberry, who was one of the last relatives to actually live in the cabin, she lived there till 1940. She told us stories when she came out and visited us, and that's her on the left, that she said that was her personal swimming pool, and she would swim in there in the cistern. You know, the days when you didn't have to just rely on your phone or your apps for entertainment. The interior with the original floor and mantle, and everything was very provocative to do an archaeology project. So what I have to do now is find somebody to help the DOS with this particular project. And at that time, I only knew one archaeologist that I had remained in contact with since my University of North Texas days, and that was Brent Williamson. He came to my office and we talked about the project. Now, he hadn't seen it yet, but he gave me one name, and that was Mr. Art Tadwater, who agreed to meet us here at the museum to talk about a possible excavation. And I remember clearly when we were in the truck driving together to see the cabin, he was telling me how busy he was. He had projects in New Mexico and West Texas and Big Bend, and he was maybe even a little bit, did not have the full confidence that this was a very good project. And as we rounded the corner to come up to the cabin, he was in mid-sentence and he went, wow. And so I could tell that he was impressed with the potential of this project. So now I had clout. I had a person that was in this profession who could then wrangle other people in this profession to come out, make plans for some kind of excavation project. Remembering that, again, I'm not an archaeologist, I'm a geologist. So what did we have to do to actually get this project going? It includes surveys where you're using a metal detector to look for areas that are attracting the metal detector. We were curious about where the outhouse was, because believe it or not, that's a very interesting place to excavate. Things get thrown into an outhouse from time to time. We suspect today we know where it is, but we're still not really sure. We do shovel tests where you take a shovel full of dirt and you pour it through a screen to see if it has a lot of glass, ceramics, metal, nails, and of course the concentration of those tests would give you an idea of where to begin an excavation. So we had been going out there a couple of times, but I still didn't have students participating in this project. And I had an epiphany in that in order to get Weatherford College students to participate in this community project, I needed an archaeology class, and I didn't have one. And so thank you to Dr. Ebe, who gave me the guidance to make a proposal for introducing an archaeology course to Weatherford College. And thank you to Vice President Indy, who also encouraged me to continue to see if I could make this happen. So in order to create a class, it has to have integrity. It has to meet the standards set forth by the SACs and the schools that are community colleges. And I had to prove that that not only would the students experience a hands-on experience at Newberry Cabin, they would be able to excavate and actually take a part in Parker County's rich history that is everywhere around us, and it would be really an added benefit to the college curriculum because we wouldn't have to go far. We wouldn't have to go to Costa Rica, for example, to excavate ruins there. And then bringing forth the fact that it would empower the students and allow them to see a perspective of the past and relating it to their current mentality, what they went through back then and what they do now, and comparing those two things. And just a shameless plug, I did a little research post of the proposal, and our college is taking the institution-wide initiative to do what is called guided pathways, and I'll give a really brief definition, and if I screw it up, let me know. But it's basically allowing students to take the classes they need to either complete, transfer, or get a job. Is that right? Basically, therefore, give and take. And so they have to have many responsibilities, and they have to pass some criteria. Critical thinking is an example of one. But two of the ones that I thought matched the archaeology class were being socially and personally responsible for items that they'd come across in an archaeology excavation, what to do with those items, not to put them in their pocket, to write about the past and document these particular artifacts. And as I did further research, it also aligns with the Code of Ethics for Texas Archeological Society, that it's a very respectful and vigilant society that encourages interaction and guides people who are not archaeologists and to expand the knowledge beyond members of Texas Archeological Society. So in the spring of 16, I was approved. I had an archaeology class, and our first semester would turn out to be the fall of 16. So I advertised. At the same time, I was also trying to start an engineering class. I wrote flyers. I wrote about the the idea that these students could be out and interact with professionals and amateur or avocational archaeologists. And there's one thing missing. I didn't have a teacher, because, say with me, I am not an archaeologist. So in comes my angel, Katrina Nuncio, who agreed to teach the course and see how it went. We worked on the actual logistics, and because she had to commute over an hour away, we made it a hybrid course where it was all of the things, face-to-face, online, and of course, working at the cabin in the field. In fall of 16, there's some pictures of some students that are at the archaeology site at the cabin, and this is 17. And now we have students working to continue where we had left off out there. So now they're conducting shovel tests and screening, and they're learning things like geodesic coordinates, which basically tells you the latitude, the longitude, and the elevation of where you're at. They are helping us position the 2x2 metric units, and then they're actually there when we start excavating at the cabin. We chose the back of the cabin because our shovel tests had indicated that there was some rich information in those shovel tests. There was a lot of glass and ceramics. And so the students are actually excavating, but they're also being a fly on the wall, per se, and they're listening to experts and amateurs and professionals talk and infer and discuss what's happening. They're seeing and witnessing the immense amount of paperwork that is involved with a project like that. They're screening and finding treasures of their own, and they squeal and they show everybody what they have found. And it is probably at this slide where I realized, And I'm very proud to say that I have actually achieved what I had set out to achieve, which was to have Weatherford College students interacting with the DOS and being a community effort and working together to make this what will ultimately be a pioneer park, a study of the excavation of the cabin, and the gallery exhibit. We received some, I'm looking for a word, I just lost it, hold on. We were in the newspaper, we received some publicity, and so we just needed to recruit more students. This particular semester, we are not offering an archaeology class, but we plan to next semester. So changing topic for just a minute, I wanted to show you some examples of some of the artifacts that we have found and that are on display here at the DOS now. This is a crock, some kind of crockery, be it like to hold cabbage or butter or cream or something. We're not sure yet. This is what we call the frozen Charlotte doll, and I have two images up there to show you that it is really small. It's like 3 centimeters in length, and I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm going to let Amanda tell you about the history of the frozen Charlotte doll. I learned some things like it's important to put aside things that have writing on it or maker's marks so that you can further research where these items had come from. And then an example of me learning as I go was I had found this musket ball, and very quickly Art said, well, based on the measurements, that looks like a ball from a cap and ball 40 caliber pistol. And I went, wow, okay, that's great. One of my favorite finds that I actually found was this brass button. And you can see that the Star of Texas and a rose, like a yellow rose of Texas, is on it. And with further research, Art discovered and matched it to another button that was found at a military site in Johnson County, and it belonged to a group called the Johnson County Slashers. So that's kind of interesting. I took a spin on it, and I, in my mind, envisioned what that button would have looked like on a jacket on a soldier. The last thing I found since my last time out there was the little blue bottle. And it was complete, and it was under what would have been the kitchen. We didn't even know we had a kitchen until Miss Pat came out and pointed that out to us and showed us the picture of her on horseback. So future plans involve offering the class again in the spring, hoping it makes, moving the cabin here to the DOS, and then we're going to excavate under the floor. So that's a plug for anyone thinking about signing up for this class. Everyone gets excited when they think about excavating under what would have been the cabin floor. So in closing, I just want to say that this has made a big change in my life as far as learning how these things happen and enabling me not only to be a part of this and join this group, but also to lead an excavation of my own and become principal investigator for a mammoth that was found north of town, which is geology. It's related to geology, and it's now at Weatherford College. So there you go. The last thing I want to do before I turn it over to Katrina is ask if there are any students that were in this class here today. Would they please stand up and be recognized? Did this change your life? Did this change your, what are you doing now, Valerie?
I'm actually majoring in anthropology.
That's awesome. I wish Dr. Farmer was here because this is evidence that Weatherford College does change lives. Right there. There she is. I was interviewing you and I was saying, what do you call yourself? And you said, I'm the principal investigator, or PI. So she is the principal investigator of this project, and she is also my beloved adjunct professor of archaeology. I'd like to bring it up now to Ms. Katrina Nuncio.
Well, good afternoon to everyone. And I would like to say, as Lori did, I am so very proud to be part of this project. It is one of the most gratifying projects I think I have ever been on. And, I don't know, it's been fun, it's been gratifying, it's been educational, you name it, it's kind of all rolled into one big ball. Okay. So if I can do this and hang on to two of these things at the same time and chew gum. Okay, so as Lori said, I am the adjunct instructor for the archaeology class, and I'm also the archaeologist and principal investigator.
Put your mic up, please.
For managing the excavation portion of the Newberry Cabin project. My qualifications to earn the privilege of the mentioned portion of the mentioned positions were attained by completing my master's degree in anthropology from the University of Texas in Arlington in 2011, and my subsequent teaching positions at UT Arlington and Tarrant County College. I've also been very active in Tarrant County Archeological Society, or TCAS as we're known. This is our local archaeology society. And I'm also active in the Texas Archeological Society, which is known as TAS. This is our state organization. And if anyone is interested and would like to know more about that, I do have brochures that I can give you at the end of the program. So I'd like to take a moment here and tell you about TCAS, because without the assistance of this organization, this project would not have happened. TCAS was first organized in 1955 and is now one of the most active regional archaeological societies with 177 members in the state of Texas. The mission statement of this organization is a perfect match for this project with our overall objectives to promote scientific archaeological exploration and research, to preserve and conserve archaeological sites and materials, to interpret and publish all data pertaining thereto, to educate the public on the importance of proper collection and preservation of archaeological material, and to train our members on the proper methods and technology needed to accomplish the above. Now that's a mouthful. Basically, our mission is to educate whoever, wherever, about archaeology. Now, as I'm going through my presentation, I'm going to point out that there have been several first-time occurrences with this class and project. Lori Gouge approached me in the summer of 2016 about the position of adjunct instructor for the first archaeology class ever to be offered at Weatherford College. This was first number one. And the job wasn't just about teaching an archaeology class. I've been doing that for many semesters at Tarrant County College. This was also about assuming the responsibility of managing the long-range archaeological excavation of this historic in situ Newberry cabin. Now, in situ means something is still in its original location, and this is truly a rarity for an 1870s cabin. As a sidebar, even if the archaeology classes don't make, my society and I are committed to this project. We will complete the excavation of this cabin, one way or the other. Now, this job was already complicated with a normal teaching position and the cabin excavation being tied together. Then an added responsibility was added with introducing students in the archaeology class to the elements of field work for the cabin. Normally, students do not get to go into the field and experience actual hands-on excavation in an introductory class. Excavation experience is usually only offered in an advanced 6-week field school. This was first number 2. Now, this was, the picture here of the original cabin. I have included this add-on that's over here We're still not too sure about that, but it will be taken down. This is our primary interest, but I can bet you that we will be under this one too when it goes. We're gonna know what's underneath this cabin once it's taken away, this portion over here. So, before I accepted the position, I had to consult with TCAS to make sure that they would support me in this excavation. I'd never tackled a project as large as this one, first number 3. And I was going to need some additional support and people for field crew besides my students. Students are wonderful, but they're beginning, they're slow. They don't have the experience if they need to move fast through something. So we have to have somebody that's going to be moving this along. And all of my fellow members in TCAS are experienced in excavation, and they're good teachers. They're either professional archaeologists, meaning their degree, they have a degree in anthropology or archaeology, or they're avocational archaeologists who've been doing archaeology for many, many, many years. So I had confidence in them being able to help me teach the students also with this. So at this point, I also consulted with Becky Shelton. She's a longtime friend of mine who is employed by the Texas Historic Commission to help me with the initial documentation of the cabin site. She pulled up a lot of old maps for us that were showing where the cabin was located originally, and we could actually see some of the outbuildings that were still there there were aerial photographs. So, long story short, with all of this, I obviously accepted the position with all its add-ons. Frankly, I am an archaeologist at heart, and Lori had me at the words excavate a historic log cabin. That did it right there. It didn't matter anything else. It's like I get to work. So this was Art and Chris out here the day we came out to really look at all of this. And this is one of the first days, the first semesters that we were out there. This was a good day. We had a lot of help out there this day. I had my students, and I had a lot of help with the Archaeology Society. And we had to put up this fencing around here. The cows, for some reason, just thought our archaeology excavation area was just wonderful to play in. And the little buggers kept going through this barbed wire even. We eventually put up cattle paneling, and that did solve it all. But we're getting going out here. And actually, I want to go back and point out something that I'll talk about here a little bit and further in my presentation. This lady right here is, she normally works in Belize, but she teaches also at TCU and at UT Arlington. And she brought students out here eventually also. So here we are, we're still talking and moving things along. Okay. So we now have been working at the cabin since the fall of 2016, during the spring and the fall long semesters. And today I have had 18 students from Weatherford College and 39 TCAS members work on this project. Now, does anybody recognize this gentleman? Yes, Ryan came out and excavated with us. He took my class and he did very, very well in the class. I decided not to teach this semester, but instead to work on analyzing the multitude of artifacts we have excavated in preparation for the exhibit here at the DOS. This is growing. Every time we go out and excavate, we're producing more bags and bags and bags of artifacts, and each one of these artifacts has to be processed, analyzed. We give it a number, we weigh it. Now, we're not cleaning it as we normally would. For archaeology conservation, usually we clean things, but the museum has requested that we not clean them. They have got special ways of dealing with things for their preservation, so we're not doing that. So we do have a lot of work left to do, and this is coming up here is first number 4. This is the first time that TCAS has worked on a project with the artifacts going directly to a museum, specifically the DOS Heritage and Culture Center. Normally it goes to one of our retaining centers or it goes to the landowners, but this time it's going directly to the museum. So another first here, and this is number 5, I have never been able to offer excavation experience to my other students from Tarrant College before. I teach general anthropology, cultural anthropology, and introduction to archaeology there. So it's not only available to my students, but it's also available, like I just said a while ago, to students from other colleges in the Metroplex. Having an archaeology project that is located within a convenient driving distance from the DFW Metroplex is something our organization has not enjoyed in many, many years. You know, if you just kind of look around Dallas and Fort Worth, there's a lot of cement and a lot of building. Well, anything that might have been there is covered up. You know, so we're going to do archaeology, we're going to have to drive for a bit. So for us to have this project that is close by is very, very special. So this is a valuable tool that we promote, like I say, to the other colleges and to our archaeology society. Now, this is something that I am so very proud of. We found this, and I hope this brings some memories here to Miss Pat, because these weren't exposed when she was out at our site. She did come out at the site. As Lori said, our excavations have focused at the back of the cabin, and there was a kitchen, as she said, back here, and that long since disappeared. So a lot of this right here was underneath the kitchen flooring. Well, we started out here and we worked our way back, and we kept finding these big flagstones here, and we said, we're just going to leave those and see what shows up with this. Well, we worked our way back and we got back here, and this is like a little patio area right here. And maybe somebody else knows something about this. We don't know what these are. When you go out to the side here, we were starting to get them over here. There's some little stones right in here they're standing upright like this, and there's like 3 or 4 of them stacked right here. And we thought, well, maybe that's to separate a little garden or something from there. But there's enough of them for us to take notice of it. It wasn't just random that the stones got turned on in and set that way. So we have a little patio here, and we're thinking we stepped out of the kitchen onto this patio. And here was the walkway then, and in the photograph that Lori showed a while ago of Miss Pat on her horse, there was a white picket fence that came out this direction to keep the livestock away from the house. So we're thinking that, you know, here we go with this pathway out here, and we hope that as we come out here, keep coming to the north, we're hoping that we are going to find out a little bit further away the outhouses. If we can just find one, we'll be thrilled. And I know you guys are looking at us like, y'all are nuts, you're gonna go dig in an old outhouse. I may do it with a rubber suit on, but I'll be in there, believe me. When an outhouse, so to speak, gets full, they would stop using it, and that became an easy place to throw their rubbish, their trash. So, okay, that works. And then they would eventually cover it up with dirt and move on and dig another one. Well, like I say, if we can just find one of those, we're going to feel like we're really, really lucky. So we've got to do some digging on that, literally digging to try to find out where this is, what's all here. And here's another picture that shows this a little bit better. I'm sorry, I keep moving on. Here's one of those standing upright stones. They're little things, but they move on this way, and then we had some going out this way. Okay. Now, this still shows here where we do have the porch is here. This has been moved at this point, and the fireplace has been moved also. It's in waiting for the cabin to be moved if we ever get enough dry weather here for this to happen. So as Lori said, we are waiting very impatiently for this cabin to be moved. See, the floorboards in these old cabins had cracks in the floorboard where the boards joined. And, you know, daily life, you go along, think about how many things that you drop in your house. And all of these things, if they weren't picked up, went through the floor cracks. And where are they staying? Underneath the cabin. So we are planning on this being a very artifact-rich area. We're probably going to have trouble getting all of us in that little area to dig because everybody's going to be wanting to get in there. But that's our next plan. Once that the cabin is moved, that's where we will immediately go to start excavating. So once we do finish underneath here, we'll most likely begin to search for the outhouses. Like I said, if we can just find one, we'll be tickled pink. And then we will probably, if time and availability to the land is permitted, and this is where it gets really tricky here with all of this, we would really like to work our way around the other sides of the cabin, like dig over here, dig here in the front of it, and you can actually get access the side of the cabin is over here. We would like to put some units in on those sides of the cabin also to see what we can find there. Also, once you know, I'm looking at this here. I'm thinking maybe 2 more years here. It's going to take us, what do you think, Jen? Yeah, 2 more years at least. And that's something I didn't do here. I'm sorry, I'll come back to get you guys. I want to make sure I introduce you guys here. Once we get done with the excavation, and you saw the artifacts that we've gathered up here in just 4 semesters worth on that table, think about 2 more years worth of excavation and artifacts. So once we manage to go through all of those and analyze them, then the thing comes back to me full circle here. And one of the things that I will do is produce a report that will tell the story of this cabin, the historical aspects of it, what the artifacts mean that give us the dates here. We have got a oral interview that has been done with Miss Pat, and that, you know, I want to say the significant portions of that would be included in this report. So that gives me publication. And one of the other things about this is that I have a lot of younger archaeology friends here, people that are degree, and they need to publish. Desperately need to publish. And I, with that in mind, will have co-authors in my report so that these young archaeologists will be able to get publishing credit also for this. When you're young and upcoming, getting this valuable publication experience is very, very hard to do. So, once the report is finished, it will be available to the public. It will be available here at the museum also. And as a note, as a professional archaeologist, I am honor bound to publish this report for other archaeologists and students to use as a learning tool. Otherwise, all of our archaeological efforts truly are for nothing if that report doesn't go out for people to learn from. So let me right here, because we didn't introduce you guys, and I apologize for that. I have got 4 members here of my Archaeology Society. Would y'all just kind of stand up and wave back to the people here, you guys? And I didn't, you know, Lori's not part of the normal crew, okay? She's part of the operating staff, so I'm sorry. I didn't exclude you on that. So that concludes my portion of this, and I'm going to turn it over to Amanda. Can you get me out of here? You're going to get me. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Amanda Edwards, and I'm the curator here at the Doss Heritage and Culture Center. And to wrap this program up today, one of the things about a year ago, Katrina and I started talking about was, and Lori, what are we going to do with all of these artifacts? You saw all the bags on that table, and that's just really kind of, I think there's even more than that. But what happens to them? they're gonna come to the DOS, but what happens to them when they get here? What do we do with all that material? A lot of it is rusty square nails, pieces of glass, pieces of ceramic, but there are tons of little gems speckled throughout all those bags that are gonna give us clues into what the lives of these people who lived in this cabin were like. And we've mentioned her several times, but Miss Pat Newberry Hewitt is here, and she was the last living person to live in the Newberry cabin, and she's featured in our exhibit that we'll take a tour of. But she was very gracious to come and do an oral history interview with us, give us some clues into kind of what life was like in that cabin, give us some insight into where we should look, where the archaeology team should dig. She helped me with some of the genealogy, giving me some names and ideas to go hunt and kind of go down different paths to be able to find out some of the information that we have now on this cabin. So I'm going to go through a really quick, kind of like Museum 101, what happens to these items when they get to the museum. Every archaeological project produces an archaeological collection. All the items from this project will be a part of the Newberry Cabin Archaeological Collection here at the museum. And what you might think is just the items that they dug up are part of this collection, but it really extends past that. Non-cultural materials such as ecofacts, soil samples, radiocarbon samples. We didn't do a lot of that with this project, but all of those would be included in an archaeological collection at a museum because they help explain the collection, date the collection, different things. Records such as maps, photos, field notes, any lab data that the archaeological team is producing, that's also part of our collection. Digital data such as any global positioning that we did, CAD drawings, anything like that would be associated with the collection. And then any research results, including the report that Katrina referenced. And what happens when they come here? As a museum curator, I decide what collection these would fall under. Does it go into our permanent collection, an education collection, or a temporary loan collection? I look at how the objects should be handled. One thing Katrina said is we ask them not to clean the objects like they normally do because it could potentially wash off maker's marks or identifying things on the object that we would use to be able to date an item or figure out where the item belongs. And then we look at, is this a permanent donation to the collection, which this is, or is it a temporary loan for research and display purposes? At the DOS here we have 3 collections, our permanent collection, a teaching collection, and a library study collection. All of these items will eventually be accessioned into our permanent collection. And accessioning just means that they go into the collection, they receive a unique sequential number, and then they have documentation that shows that we actually have legal ownership of those objects. And some of the documentation includes a deed of gift when appropriate from a donor, an accession sheet with weights, measurements, condition, catalog records for each object, donor questionnaires if appropriate, and additional documentation that can help us contextualize the artifact. When we bring items in, we do clean or quarantine them. For archaeological collections, we're dealing more on the cleaning, less than quarantining. When we bring in any kind of fur or hide or taxidermy animals, we do quarantine them, freeze them before they're allowed into the collection to make sure no pests are transferring from outside the museum to inside. So with the archaeological items, we will take and clean some of them off, but we just are very careful to make sure that we're not removing any maker's marks or identifying impressions on the surface. And then we handle objects very carefully to make sure that the oils on our skin and acids and salts aren't being transferred to the object. So we use cotton or nitrile gloves to make sure that those items are not being damaged by our skin. And the interesting thing about an archaeological object that is different than a normal object that comes into the museum is that these objects were at one point lost or abandoned and buried underground or underwater. And so they actually deteriorate faster than normal artifacts because when they went underground, they reached a different stabilization and they hit an equilibrium. And when you excavate them, their deterioration goes a lot quicker because you're exposing it to new air and new elements. So we have to be very careful when we're dealing with these objects that we're not causing undue damage. If you notice that it's a little chilly in here, and if you go into the galleries, it stays at 68 to 70 degrees and about 40 to 60% humidity, and that's to allow the objects to, sorry, my throat's dry, to not deteriorate any quicker in the museum. We also make sure that we store everything properly in bags that are acid-free, and we label all of our objects to make sure that all items can be matched to their appropriate records. Now, the artifacts that you'll see in the Newberry Cabin exhibit right now are still in process from the archaeological team. This is unique. Thank you, Katrina. This is unique because we are actually showing you kind of mid-process what this project is like in an exhibit. We're not waiting till it's completely finished. Like Katrina said, that could be another 2 years. We're giving the public a sneak peek into what it's like for them to process this collection. So all of the numbering and labeling you'll see in the exhibit on the archaeological finds are the archaeology team's records of how they identify the object. And then when it actually gets accessioned into our collection, we will add our own numbering system. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I think we've seen this crock, and it is on display in the gallery. The Newberry family came to Parker County in the 1850s, and in the exhibit we trace some of their genealogy. The cabin itself is located on the John F. Porter Survey, Abstract 1063. Porter was the first sheriff after Parker County was organized, and we're still uncertain if the cabin was built by Porter or by the Newberry family, because it changed hands in about the 1860s, 70s, 80s a couple of times, so there's a couple different scenarios of who built the cabin. Once we move the cabin and can remove some of the chinking, we can do some testing on it to kind of see if we can better date the cabin, and that'll give us a clue. We do know the cabin was sold to Sam P. Newberry in 1880, and we found some additional deed records that are on display that will kind of give you an outline of how the cabin changed hands over the years. The Newberry family owned the property until the Doss family purchased it in 2013, and then we were able to come in, find the cabin, and start this whole process of getting this archaeology project going. This is Sam P. Newberry and his family, and this was the original abstract for the land. And like I said, Pat Newberry lived in the cabin from 1931 to 1948. The main part of the cabin is what is still standing. She did tell us about a kitchen that you can see in this picture of her on the back, and there's a larger one in the gallery. There was plumbing to the kitchen, but not to the rest of the cabin. And that did give the archaeological team a lot of clues on some areas to dig and find some really artifact-rich dig areas. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's called mending. And my best example of what mending is taking 100 puzzles, mixing them together, and throwing away 90% of the pieces, and then trying to work all the puzzles. And this is basically what mending is in a nutshell. And as the archaeological team processes these artifacts and they come to the museum, what we are trying to do is identify what these items were, what their dates were, what they could have been used for. And this crock is just one example. We're thinking it could have been a butter churn because of some wear patterns in the bottom, but until we find a maker's mark and can get a more accurate size, try to find more pieces to it, potentially in other surrounding units, we won't know for sure because we don't have all the pieces. And these are just some of the other, like I said, field notes, records that we look at. One of these drawings, I know Katrina hates me showing this, but this was one of her sketches of the units. So these are all 2 by 2 units, and this would be where the cabin is, and you can kind of see all the different dig pits they did. And then this was a little drawing we did when we were doing our oral history with Pat that talked about the kitchen and the bedroom, and then she had a room off to the side of the cabin that's no longer there. So we were comparing this to Katrina's units, and we kind of overlaid them to kind of get it, and then this is an aerial view of the property, to kind of get an idea of where to look for additional objects. So here are some of the finds that you'll see on display. And the frozen Charlotte doll that I know Lori mentioned in her presentation was really popular between the 1890s and 1920s during the Victorian era. And it's based on a poem about a little girl who went out in the cold and froze to death. It's a very morbid poem. But this little doll was given to kids to remind them to listen to their parents. And yeah, Victorian, they're funny. It's a naked figurine molded of one solid piece. A lot of times it wasn't even glazed, so it actually could float in water. They would even bake them into pies, and you'd find them in, like, I don't know, you'd be the winner. Very strange. But this little bitty doll, and I can show it when we go on the gallery tour. It is like literally this big. It's teeny tiny. That's a penny for reference. But it was found, and it's pretty much intact. I think one of its feet is a little bit gone, but other than that, it's in good shape. They found peach pits down about 20, 30 centimeters, so like petrified peach pits, bottles, buttons, glass, all kinds of neat things. And I'll put this back. The interesting thing about all these objects is for us, when we decided we were going to move these cabins to the park, I started researching each of the 5 cabins' history. And I wanted to be able to tell the story of the people that lived in these cabins. Now, one of the cabins we're moving, the Strain cabin, who was intermarried to the Newberrys in some areas, they actually have a diary of one of the gentlemen that lived in there, a daily diary for like 2 or 3 years. He wrote down everything he did. It's fascinating, but we don't always have that kind of record. And so, though we do have some land deeds and genealogy records, and we thankfully have Miss Pat who's willing to talk to us and give us some of her life in the cabin, back then they didn't keep a lot of written records. They're important to them. So these archaeological digs can show us objects that they would have used, things that they would have had access to, which will give us a little bit more insight into their daily lives. So, instead of keep talking, if anybody has any questions, Lori, Katrina, or I, we can answer some questions, and when we're finished, we will go take a look in the gallery. Yes, ma'am?
I first of all have a statement. My name is Leanne Newberry Jones. I'm one of the last owners of this property. And for years before this, we actually are also kin to the Dawsons. We're all kin. Our families were all intermarried and came from southern Tennessee to this area of Texas before the Civil War, first settled down on the Brazos River and then moved up, and maybe we can try to piece that together. But my mother, many years ago, had told Dottie that she would donate the cabin to the museum whenever they could get it here. So this is just really gratifying for me and my cousin, Elizabeth Bergman Bazell, whose mother, Ann Newberry Bergman, is still here. And she is the granddaughter of, as my father was the grandson of Sam P. Newberry, who bought the cabin. So our family is so grateful that the things that Dottie and Mom talked about, and Ann kind of helped to make things happen too. If you know Ann, that's what she does. We're really grateful that this has happened, and we're just glad you found something besides shotgun shells and beer taps, because what the cabin was used for after Pat and JC and Mabel moved out was cattle run there, and generally we were just talking about my grandfather would take us out to drive, and then my parents, we would go out there. It was eventually, that second dog trot was turned into kind of a hunting lodge, but it was not built for that purpose. But I have a lot of questions. Obviously, I have the family trait of talking too much. But I just wanted to say that, and I need to catch up with Pat big time. So anyway, it's just terrific that this has been a learning experience as well as an enriching activity for the whole community.
Thank you. We'll visit afterwards. And for anyone wondering, we are in the process of moving the Newberry cabin. I think they mentioned the chimney has come down, the porch has come off. We were scheduled to move at the beginning of September. Everything was good to go, and then it started just pouring rain constantly. And that made that impossible. So we are waiting for at least a week or two of dry weather, and then the cabin will be moving here, and we'll start the restoration process on the cabin.
There's a question over here.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm Max Rayfield, retired from the college. Back there where you were excavating around the patio, would there have been an extensive area where they did the wash? Hangers, doing clothes washing and rinsing and so forth? Did you see
Potentially,
any evidence of that?
Katrina, no?
We haven't, not that we've recognized yet.
That should be around that cabin someplace.
And like Katrina was saying, they didn't get fully on the sides of the cabin, so it could have been on one of the sides, like, I'll go back to this map. So they came straight off the back of the cabin,
Right.
and so it could have been in like this area that they haven't really gotten to, or over here. So there's still a lot to be discovered.
Next question.
Yes, ma'am.
This is for the Newberry descendants. Do you remember seeing an outhouse? Because that'd be an easy way to find it.
Pat did tell us where she remembered kind of off, and that was after they had finished the semester where they were digging, so I think that's one of the first areas they're going to look in. And I can see if you guys remember any.
By the time Jack and Mabel and Pat moved out, we had the mesquite. You know, because we were not out there. You know, sometimes we'd go out there and camp, and I'd be really interested to talk to y'all, because land had multiple uses in the last quarter century. It was a site of the Civil War reenactment. I don't know how much of that was.
Around the cabin.
It wasn't around the cabin, so I'm sure y'all have ways you date, like get all that.
All right, any other questions? Okay, I will be back in the gallery, which is
One
just...
more. Would you tell them about the festival coming up?
Yes, on October 13th, for anyone interested, the DOS will be having their first annual Pioneer Heritage Festival. It's free, 10 to 5. We are suggesting people bring canned goods for the Center of Hope, but TCAS, Tarrant County Archeological Society, will be here. They're going to actually dig some pits in the back where we're going to be putting the cabins and seed them with artifacts so kids can come and experience what it's like to do an archaeological dig. The exhibit will be open and we'll have members in there such as Marvin Glasgow doing flint knapping, which is making arrowheads, and things like that. Lots of activities. We have a turkey basket weaver, lots of fun pioneer things for people to come and do. So, all right, thank you guys.